Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick McGilp and Chris McElwain. We'll also be joined by John Hughes as well, once he's able to get in to the conversation. And there is plenty to discuss, absolutely loads to discuss. We have been called paranoid over the years, Patrick, and often I hear the answer or the assertion, perhaps we've not been paranoid enough. And there's a big story in Scottish football. We're constantly talking about refereeing, the poor standard of refereeing, the poor standard of the VAR since it was introduced. And of course, there's been a few changes recently with the head of refereeing changing to Willie Collum. He's tried to make changes. He's trying to be transparent. He's doing his online show to talk about the big mistakes that his referees consistently make. And yesterday, there was a massive turning point, I think, in relation to the one, the only Alan Muir, who has been emptied. He has been mutually consented. He has been sacked for all intents and purposes, Patrick. And obviously, they've cited three recent high-profile incidents, two involving Celtic. We're going to have a wee look over the last 10 years at certain other honest mistakes made by the same guy. What's your take on all of this?
I think it's good news. Every time you see Alan Muir on the referee team sheet, you think, there's always potential for a mistake. I'm sure there are probably many of us out there who, no matter what name we see on the refereeing team sheet, we sort of have our head in our hands going, what is he going to do today? But Alan Muir in particular, I think is right up there with, some of the worst. I mean, I don't think he's a match official referee. I think he's a linesman, and he's obviously been on VAR duty. I seen he was the first full-time VAR referee, and he's obviously now been sacked. So, I mean, the changes in refereeing this season, to be fair, have been positive. Whether the result in better decisions, I've not seen any sort of analysis done. But as you say there, Willie Collins been a lot more transparent, doing his sort of monthly shows on YouTube, talking about high-profile decisions. He seems quite happy to sort of face up to public scrutiny and answer critics. Um, Again, I've not seen any sort of stats behind whether decision making has actually improved. I know VAR still frustrates, probably fans of every team, but Celtic fans as well. But I mean, Alan Muir was obviously recent mistakes, high profile mistakes, have been baffling to say the least. And I think the one that will stick out in most, if not everyone's mind, will be the one, a decade ago, as the sort of title says. He was involved in that famous handball incident, Josh Meekings, the semi final in the Scottish Cup. I mean, that should have been it for that whole refereeing team, in my opinion. That was such an outrageous decision. I don't think I've seen a decision that bad since then, to be honest. I mean, that was just absolutely dreadful. You had a guy on the goal lines, you had a guy, the linesman, you had Stephen McLean with a clear view, not to sort of go over old decisions from 10 years ago, but it was such
Oh,
an appalling
yes, let's
mistake.
do it. Let's go for the old decisions. We're talking a decade of absolute shameful decisions. And that's one of the biggest ones. It was 10 years ago. And we're not bitter. I were. It was a shocker. It's an absolute shocker of a decision.
It was terrible, and I think Alan Muir. I can't remember if he was the linesman or the goal line assistant, but I think he was probably had the best view of it. Certainly, if he was the goal line assistant, I remember his name cropping up quite a lot when that was discussed at the time. Probably, I mean, a very consequential decision for Celtic. You could argue that we don't get Brendan Rodgers if that goal goes in. The butterfly effect is a weird and wonderful thing. So I wouldn't rewrite history, but still an absolute disgrace of a decision. He's obviously had a lot of high profile ones this season with VAR, and hopefully it's the second or third step in a long journey to improving Scottish refereeing standards.
Yeah, absolutely. It is my intention, Patrick, to go as far back as 2015 in that decision against Inverness Cali Thistle in the Scottish Cup, because I think what you need to do in relation to this is it's all about bodies of evidence. When you talk about Alan Morrison and I broadcast a show in terms of the pattern of assistance, which basically this, if you want to, in summary, summarise that, it's basically that what was happening in Scottish football was not possible. You could not put it down to a game of chance in relation to just how few penalties were awarded against Rangers, just how many penalties were awarded for Rangers. And again, opened up the show by talking about paranoia. We're constantly told we're paranoid. How can you win so many trebles? How can you win so many trophies if the refs are against you? Well, what we did that night, Alan and I, is we stuck to facts. Thanks to Alan and his incredible research methods, we stuck to facts. And there was, no chance. There was no chance of the trend being the way it was. You look at the 4 seasons under Crawford Allen as the head of referees in Scottish football. And in those 4 seasons, look at the graph. If there's a graph of James Tavernier's goals throughout his entire career, those 4 seasons, they go through the roof. Crawford Allen is removed from post and they go back down to what you would expect from a penalty kick taken right back. It was an anomaly of sorts, or was it a pattern of assistance? And we spoke about this. And again, I have absolutely no issue going through a number of decisions that Alan Muir made that affected Celtic negatively. And I'm going to ask in the comment section, chip in. Please chip in with others that we might have missed. Hopefully we can get Big John Hughes in on the act as well, because we love a Yogi rant. And when it's things like this, I'm pretty sure that you'll have his powder dry for it. Right, so what have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 7, guys. I've got 7 decisions that I think could be scrutinised. And it makes you wonder in relation to the motivation behind certain individuals who, let's be honest, guys, right? If any of us 4, and I include John in this, hopefully the black screen will be removed and we can see the man in all his glory. If any of us was a football referee, we would be biased, right? I'm pretty sure you'll admit that. I would be biased. I can't help it. For me, it would be a subconscious thing. I want Celtic to win. I have done for the best part of 47 years. I can't switch that off like a light switch. And in any other nation, that is accepted within the authorities, that, bias exists. In any other walk of life, bias exists. If you've ever had to sit in a courtroom as part of the jury, right, and the person that's involved or any of the people involved in the case, you've got to declare it because of the bias that may exist. It exists everywhere else, Chris, except it would appear in Scottish football. That's why I think this is a landmark move. I don't think we can underestimate the impact of what's getting said here by him being removed from post.
Yeah, I agree. Just before we do that, just let people know that Yogi is rebooting at the moment, so I'm in dialogue with Yogi. And
can we get an AI image of Yogi rebooting?
We should have a Yogi placeholder. Yeah, I know. So hopefully he'll join us soon, because I know he'll want to speak about this. Look, for my part, I think it's a positive move, and it's not just a positive move for Celtic; it's a positive move for Scottish football, I think, as a whole. One of the biggest factors in perceptions, and I use the word perception in inverted commas, perceptions of bias. It's fed by the lack of transparency and a lack of control and process and due diligence around the officiating programme in this country. Now, look, everybody's subject to bias, right? Whether it's unconscious or conscious, doesn't matter. Everybody's subject to bias. But you can circumvent bias by putting appropriate controls and checks and balances in place. You can have, not one single point of authority. You can have a governance process, for example, which allows decisions to be made in a transparent and clear and rationalised fashion. And we've never had that. And because of that, our referees, our officials are subject to, accusations of, at best, incompetence, at worst, bias. And then we start to see evidence which has been presented in the case of Alan Muir. You think, how is that allowed to happen? Right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and say with 100% confidence that Alan Muir is biased, or he favours Rangers, or he favours one team or another. But when you look at the evidence, and you look at the optics, and you look at what's presented right in front of you, it's understandable why there's that perception. So for me, listen, no harm to Alan Muir or any other official, being bad at your job, or even, throwing in a bit of unconscious bias, for me, doesn't necessitate, repercussions or hate or anything like that. So, still a human being, etc. But in the context of doing the job, right, and making sure such an important job in terms of the the success and the sustainability and how our game is perceived, we must put the appropriate checks and control to remove this doubt and this dubiety over bias and over incompetence, but we don't do it. So when you see this evidence, and we'll use the Alan Muir one as an example, we see all this evidence, all these incidents over the past 10 years. Is it any wonder we're looking at that and saying, how did that decision cannot possibly be made objectively or fairly? It just can't. And by the way, there's no evidence to support that it was. Right? So it's something has to change, and I think the step taken. Now, look, you don't want to see anyone lose their job. You don't want to see anyone, unfairly dismissed or used as a scapegoat. But what this has demonstrated is that actually we're going to start to remove this fog of war over the decision-making process. We're going to acknowledge when wrong decisions are made, and actually, if wrong decisions are made, irrespective of whether they're deliberate or through incompetence or lack of diligence, whatever, we're now going to show that there's repercussions for getting these wrong, because it can have, as Patrick said earlier, it can have real consequences to clubs, not just us, right? And we're able to talk about it irrespective of the fact that we're so far ahead in the league, right? We still have to call it out because it's wrong. But you imagine if you're a team at the bottom of the league, all the personnel that would suffer through relegation that one of these decisions could cause. So it's not a Celtic restricted problem, right? But we are in a position where we can call it out, and we can call it out objectively, because actually we're doing it from a position of strength and a position of success.
What I would say before we get a drum roll for the big man joining us is, yeah, you're right, it affects so many different teams if you're incompetent at your job and you're a referee. But I just think there's such a body of evidence that would suggest that this is more than that when it comes to the individual Alan Muir, right? And we're going to go through the examples dating right back to the infamous one against Inverness, Cali Thistle. And let us know in the comments if there's any that we've missed as well once we run through these. I think it's an absolutely brilliant move to actually call out somebody who, yeah, they will say that it's incompetence. They don't think that bias exists in Scottish football refereeing. Must be the only occupation on the planet where bias doesn't exist. And then other Celtic fans, and I've not got into the comments to check yet, will say it's just downright cheating. And that's your opinion. I can't use that word because I can't prove that. But what I can do is present 6 shocking decisions against Celtic that have impacted Celtic for the benefit of one team and one team only. I'm going to get the drum roll ready. Here's the big man. I'm going to blame Chris for you not being in. There we go. It's the big man. It's John Hughes. Welcome back to the show, John.
John, can you just clarify that I was giving you really good support there while you were trying to get online? I was communication and,
You were just, those comments about deliberately keeping you out so you could get a word in. You know what I mean? Thanks very much for that, Chris. Yes, no, I did. I'm very, very IT literate. So, used the cleaner thing and then rebooted, and that appears to have done the job. But it was working perfectly well beforehand. Just IT for you, isn't it? Anyway, my tea's biased against me, lads. It's biased against me.
It is.
Pattern of assistance.
Inherent bias.
You've turned the refs against us. Right, here we go. Here is the tale of woe. This is just examples I was managing to clutch from memory and a few contacts. Let us know in the comment section. So, Patrick, you've already mentioned one. We have long memories. Yes, it's an elephant state of mind on Acsom. We have long memories. And if we go right back to April 2015, Ronnie Dyle is the manager of Celtic. It's the Scottish Cup semi-final. And we're 1-0 up against Inverness, Caledonian Thistle. Now, I'll clarify Alan Muir's position within this game. He was known as an additional assistant referee, which meant he was standing on the goal line. He was the tech. He was the IT. He was the goal line technology, right? And he was 5 yards away from the handball incident. Josh Meekins handles the ball. It would have put Celtic 2-0 up. It was Lee Griffiths, of course. It would have put us 2-0 up. We eventually lose the game 3-2. So you talk about momentum, and you talk about you go 2 up, you win the game. If you go 2-2 against Hibs at Easter Road, we'll come to that one, you win the game. And that's a treble that's on the line, right? So talking about impact, that is a treble that's on the line by getting knocked out of that particular game. Inverness obviously went on and played Falkirk in the final, didn't they? And they beat Falkirk in the final. Big Yogi Hughes was the manager of Inverness Cali Thistle. Right, what did Celtic do at the time? Celtic actually wrote to the SFA 10 years ago. They were inundated with Celtic fans getting in touch with them, to say, what are you going to do about this? And they wrote to the SFA and they complained about Alan Muir 10 years ago. The referee, the man in charge was Stephen McLean, you'll remember. And there's a famous image of them all coming off the park, honestly, looking as guilty as sin. So that's where my memory starts with regards to Muir. I don't know if there was any before that, John, but he's been in my mind all season. And when he's been making these decisions, these wrong decisions this season and last, because of that particular one back in the Ronnie Dyler era. What was your thoughts? Patrick and Chris have already said what they think about the decision to remove him as a manager, as a referee, as the first full-time in Scottish football, the first full-time video assistant referee. He's now, by the way, he will be allowed to observe games. He'll be a referee's observer, but it's a fall from grace, and it's Willie Collum who's made a decision, John.
Oh, that's cracking. So he'll be able to criticise other referees for not being biased towards us. What a great decision that is. Well, look, I suppose we have VAR to thank for this, because at the end of the day, without the VAR being there and without you being able to categorically prove that it's been misused, the rules haven't been applied correctly, then this would never have happened. And all the days of, all you had was some highlights, maybe sometimes no highlights, and it was, people were just getting away with stuff right, left, and centre. So I think it's a fantastic move, and long overdue. There's been much worse offenders than him. And they've just been getting away with it. The only other even remotely close thing we've had was when your man was removed for lying about what Neil Lennon said. No, that was Dallas, wasn't it? It was Hugh Dallas. So he got punted for that, and now we've got his son refereeing us. I'm sure there's no bias there. I think it's long overdue. Delighted to see it, and it's great to have some transparency for once. To have people actually saying, "Look, this is what's happening. This wasn't good enough, and now this guy's got to go." And I think I heard you saying while I was trying to get that sorted, Paul John. The consequences. It's really, really important that people are accountable. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really important when he's sitting there making his wee biased decisions in his wee biased VAR office, when he's just sitting thinking, how can I rule out this goal? What's a plausible explanation for me to rule out this goal? And, stretching the bounds of imagination, basically saying, oh, that ball's out and that's it. Didn't see that, just ignore that. All of this stuff. So, it's when the next person is sitting thinking about doing it, hopefully they'll be thinking about their career. And just trying to apply the laws fairly, easy for me to say, just trying to apply the laws fairly and not, do something as outrageous and obvious. They have to accept as well the limitations of the VAR, because we don't have all the angles. So we don't have the same quality that we should have. I still don't know what difference the price would make, but it's got to be worth it, surely, to God. So we're making guesses, and you can't be making guesses, and that's basically what he did. And it's but as you say, I'd suggest there've been stuff that's actually been more blatant. I'm sure you'll come to that in your list that he's not been caught out for. Or decisions that he's not been caught out, other people have not been caught out for. But something like this, I suppose it suits the refs. I suppose it suits Willie Collum, because it's actually a technical issue, really. You've just, you've not obviously cheated, but you have made an assumption here. You're not allowed to make those assumptions. So he doesn't need to bin him for cheating. He's just saying, look, you haven't really been applying that as it's supposed to be applied. So everybody wins, really. We get rid of the guy, and they don't have to call their man out for cheating. But look, is it going to happen again? Hopefully not. Let's hope this makes it a lot more difficult. But certainly, it's about time that we saw some changes. And fair play to Willie Collum. for doing it. Whether he's calling them out for cheating or not, he's still getting rid of them. So I think the message is clear to the rest of the referees.
Yeah, I think that's important, John. The fact that, you know, it is calling someone out and saying, we're drawing a line here, and if it happens again, this is the consequences. I think the best example I ever read about in terms of unconscious bias was way back when 442 was a really good football mag, back in probably the 90s. And they spoke to this fellow who basically said that if you are on the break on a football park and it's you plus another striker, and you don't quite like that striker, you don't even think about it, you will be less likely to pass to him than you would if you had a good relationship off the park with that individual. And it's not even something that you process. It's just a decision, a split-second decision. It's unconscious bias. You'll take the shot yourself. Always think about that when somebody's particularly selfish on the football park. I wonder if they like each other. I think it was around, remember there was the rumours around Andy Cole and Teddy Sheringham at Man United, and they didn't like each other. Yeah. I think it was around that, and they had this discussion about it, and that was the example that they gave. It doesn't matter how great you are in terms of being an athlete and a professional, you still suffer the same as everybody else when it comes to that split decision.
Well, can I just say that on that one? My dad always said wee Bertie didn't pass them. And funny enough, the last time I mentioned that in the comments, there was a couple of people in the comments who are obviously old enough to remember saying, no, he was bang on, wee Bertie didn't pass him. So, you know, he wasn't just being paranoid.
But this is the thing. And by the way, you can now get the heat maps, can't you? And you can tell who passes to who most often as well. And obviously, their two centre-halves are passing the ball quite a bit. I'm going to go back to 2015. Yes, we've got long memories, and you can call us as paranoid as you please, because I think this is a result for Celtic. October 2015, we're playing Motherwell at Fir Park. Ronnie Dyle is the manager again. And we win the game 1-0, and it's the seldom seen kid, Nadir Chiefche, who scores the winner. I don't know if you remember this game. Anybody in the comments who'll know what's coming. They had a player called Kieran Kennedy, who was involved in two different incidents that day. Bizarrely enough, Alan Muir was the referee. And Kennedy took out Scott Brown on the penalty spot. It was the most blatant penalty kick you will ever see in your life, and it was waved away by Muir. There was another incident as well, whereby Chris Commons headers the ball right into Nadir Chiefche to score another goal, and he puts it goalwards, and the ball's handled by the same person, Kennedy. You might remember, very similar actually to the Josh Meekins incident that happened, and Muir was the referee that day as well. That's another one ticked off the list. I'm just going to run through these, lads, because it's all about evidence, right? December 2021, we are drawing with Ross County. This became something of a famous victory for the Tony Ralston aficionados out there. We're drawing 1-1. And at this point, Celtic are second in the league, you'll remember, under Ange Postecoglou. We're second in the league, and at 1-1, we're 6 points behind Rangers at 1 each. Can you remember the Carol Starfelt sending off? And how controversial it was. At 1 each, Starfelt gets sent off the park. Leading up to the corner, there's a handball in the box, penalty not given. And then Big Tony comes and saves the day. Who's the ref that day? Alan Muir as well. Then you move into 2024 and 2023. And I'm pretty sure there's loads more. Let us know in the comments section. August, Haksabanovic. Remember him? The cult legend or leg end. And he should have got a penalty against Kilmarnock. It was a stonewaller. They're beating us 1-0. It's the League Cup, the only trophy domestically that Brendan Rodgers has failed to win as the manager of Celtic. And at the time Kilmarnock scored, Taylor is off the park because he's been elbowed in the face and nothing is done. And the referee's Alan Muir. And there's a wee picture of him and his wee pal Derek McInnes after the game looking pretty smug. And that was in 2023. Then you move into 2024 and you've got Maeda. This is quite recently. Maeda is in the box and he's penalised for punching the ball into the net against Motherwell. When you watch it back, it's pretty clear that Stephen O'Donnell takes him down and it's a penalty kick. And you're looking at that. Who's the ref? Yes, you've guessed it. It's Alan Muir. And then you've got February 2025, where Maeda scores a goal against Hibs to make it 2 each. And there is obviously the audio comes out, and this is the one I think is the killer. The audio comes out and it shows that they've overturned it without conclusive evidence to do so. Alistair Johnston obviously cuts it back. John, going back to your point earlier, the best shot I've seen was a vlogger standing at the game.
Right.
A vlogger got a better shot than Scottish football VAR. So there's my 6. There's my 6, and it's over 10 years, and there'll be far more. You're talking lost trebles, potentially on 2 occasions here, Patrick. I'm going to get all the paranoid snips and clips on the socials, and I don't care. I think this is the kind of action that as an organisation, the SFA need to take in order to make sure that we're credible as a football nation.
Yeah, absolutely. That Kilmarnock one was particularly egregious. I still personally believe that Kilmarnock goal's offside. I think it's very, very narrow, very, very tight, but I think it's offside. I actually forgot that Taylor was off the park due to that elbow. But as you say as well, that penalty was a penalty, and no surprise that Alan Muir was in charge of that game. More egregious as well because that was a cup tie, and maybe referees. I don't think they should be going into games conscious of Brendan Rodgers' cup record, but it does leave us a bitter taste in the mouth that pretty much perfect cup record is tainted by one loss, and that one loss is tainted by up to 3 refereeing mistakes. And as you say, that could have cost us a treble. We obviously sort of hit a bit of a tricky patch in the road sort of towards Christmas time, and we had 3 games after that Kilmarnock game if we progressed. So it's a fairly big if, but we would have been favourites for the competition. So it's particularly egregious in that sense. The Ronnie one as well, obviously, to go back to 2015, that would have been only our 4th treble at the time. I know we're sort of hoovering them up on a semi-regular basis these days, but at that time it would have been totally historic and an absolutely massive achievement for Ronnie Dyler. Nothing short of what he deserved. So the cup ones always get me more than the league ones. I'm sure most Celtic fans are the same. The nature of our dominance is that the occasional refereeing mistake in the league, although it might be totally indefensible and cost us a game or cost us a win, like that Hibs one, I fully believe would have went on to win that game. You can sort of get over them. You can, particularly this season that we're so far ahead. Obviously, in a title race, it would be different, but to go back to the cup, it's pretty agonising and pretty outrageous that up until now, referees have got away with keeping their jobs when they've cost teams places in cup competitions, because there's so much riding on 190 minutes of football that to make a mistake in that game is even more costly than your average league game. So just to reiterate, I'm glad the decision's been taken. Like Chris, I don't want to see anyone lose their job, but if you're consistently bad at your job, and more often than not it favours certain teams or disadvantages other teams, there's obviously got to be question marks raised, especially the nature of football, cup competitions on the line, and maybe not for Celtic, but certain placings, getting into the top 6 or getting into a European spot, for certain clubs like Motherwell, Hibs, Aberdeen, St Mirren, whatever it is, the placings can have a huge bearing. Relegation fights as well can have a huge bearing on how that club does for years to come, whether people within that club lose their job. So we need to have the best possible officials, and there needs to be retribution if officials either aren't good enough or there is a pattern of assistance for or against certain teams.
Yeah, I think another important point here is the fact that the club have very publicly called out some of these decisions. And by the way, I think Brendan Rodgers has been the best manager at doing it as well, Chris, because people going about, I remember you made the referees go on strike. No, we didn't. It was proven that people were lying in their post-match investigation into that. So, yeah, it wasn't Celtic. It was the people involved that caused the referees to go on strike in that respect. But again, it was one of the ones, if you call us out, we'll go on strike. Chris, keep calling them out. Brendan Rodgers, keep being bold, coming out after the game and calling it out.
100%. And you have to be consistent in your approach to this. And I think this is where you don't want this decision that's been taken to remove Alan Muir from his duties to be a check-the-box one-off exercise. Say, we'll do this and things will go quiet for a while and we won't have to worry. No, this has to be the first indication of an ongoing governance process now to say, as John rightly said, we're going to hold you accountable in terms of your performance, and we're going to use evidence to back that decision up. And ultimately, if you can't demonstrate that you're consistently capable of performing your job, then there's going to be consequences. And the consequence, as has been evidenced this stage, we're going to remove you from your responsibilities. I'm not entirely sure what an observer role becomes. It seems like just a move from there to move from there. I don't really get that. But for me, there has to be consequences, because what you want to create is a preventative environment, right? Whether it be bias, whether it be incompetence, what you're going to say is there's a standard, and if you don't meet that standard, you're going to be held accountable, right? Now, I agree with John, it kind of deflects away from the element of cheating. I mean, you just put the evidence down as you've listed it. I mean, I'm thinking it's cheating, right? I am thinking it's cheating, but you can't go and accuse someone of cheating. They'll just say, well, it was a mistake. Honest mistake, right? Well, okay, how do you get past that? Well, you get past it by putting the controls in place to take away the incentive to make these honest mistakes, right? These honest mistakes. You take away the incentive, you take away the capability of making these honest mistakes. And when they do feel that wee tendency to make an honest mistake, I'm going to stop doing that in a minute, but when you do get this tendency to make an honest mistake, you think about, oh, my pal Alan Muir lost his job for making too many of these honest mistakes. Last one. So it has to, on a serious point, it has to lead to a change across the surface of the refereeing organisation to say there's a standard you will meet, there's rationale put in place for your decision making, and when you don't meet that, you're going to be held accountable.
I can't believe that in the same season, not only have I got Chris McIlwain to call the refs cheats, I've got Jim Orr saying spending money on Adam Ida. He's the most cautious man. He's an accountant to trade, and I got him agreeing to spend £9.5 million on Adam Ida. Absolutely tremendous. It's a drip effect. Just keep telling you until you agree. Right. So there are going to be changes. The biggest changes, John, for me, and by the way, there's a lot of Yogi love in the comments. Look at that. Henrik McLaughlin, it's no Wednesday without Yogi. We've got the popcorn out, Gordon. Yogi rant time. Yogi rant time, Ronnie Glavin giving you, and it might be the Ronnie Glavin, I don't know yet, John, if it's the Ronnie Glavin, giving you the big green love hearts. But yeah, the bigger changes for me in Scottish football when it comes to refereeing is going back to your original point, John. We need to have a better VAR system in place, because there's somebody with a mobile phone capturing a better image of Johnston for the Maeda Leon. Which and the lines that you're talking about, Patrick, in relation to that Kilmarnock goal, I had another look at them today. The lines are not conclusive in relation to it being on or offside, right? It's like proper Etch-a-Sketch version of VAR. And we also need full-time, and I've said this, full-time refs, John, because they're refereeing a professional game of football.
Yeah. Well, I was going to start by criticising Patrick's egregious use of egregious, but then we had the egregious use of honest mistake. Air quotes.
And the air quotes, yeah.
Air quotes. Anyone does air quotes should have their fingers broken. That's what they should be in splints.
Yeah. Let's get Chris to the Belfast gig, John. Let's get Chris to the Belfast gig and we can organise it.
But yeah, I mean, but going back to what you were saying there, if there is a process and standards being applied, you would not have, for instance, pictures of referees in certain pubs with particular groups of fans and nothing being done about that. I mean, if you had a minister in your local church or whatever it was, or a priest, and there was a picture of them standing proudly in a brothel, I think there'd be questions asked. There'd at least be a disciplinary process, at least an investigation into it. People, quite rightly saying, well, how did that happen? How did that come about? How did that innocently come about that you ended up...
We all know he was taking confession that day, John. That's where he went.
That's it. So, it's... I mean, he wasn't taking confession, but it was a confession, wasn't it? It was a confession of exactly what his bias was. It's just ridiculous. But the fact nothing happened about that is outrageous. It's a joke, obviously, funny joke, but still outrageous. Yeah. And you have to have standards for people, especially in that you cannot be seen. If you are seen to in any way publicly express a bias, you've got, that's you done, post, you're done.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You cannot have that. Or you can decide to be biased towards a team and then you just don't referee them, or don't referee any game that's going to impact them massively, which basically almost rules you out anyway. So, I mean, and I saw the ridiculizer comment, and they're saying, it's loser talk to basically, blame refs. Yeah, to an extent, but we need a level playing field. It's not loser talk to want a level playing field. Perhaps you could say we should be good enough to overcome them. But again, and a lot of these games are fine margins. You cannot just assume that we have to be 10 times better than everyone else to overcome bias and, really egregious mistakes. So,
That's a double whammy.
That was a double whammy. But, it's not good enough to say that we have to be so much better than everyone else. We should expect to get the same fair treatment that everyone else, I'm sure, demands. And we shouldn't have to be overcoming refs. That's not what the game's about. And certainly, I mean, you've seen there at the weekend, there are certain times in certain games where you're not playing well enough. Your form isn't good enough, where the result, especially as Patrick was pointing out in cup games, is vital. So you can overcome bad refs maybe over the course of a season, but they have power in a game that, a critical moment that, basically defines how that game is going to end. It defines the outcome of the game. And it's not a ridiculous thing to say that. That is football. That's what happens. Referees influence games. Goals influence games, chalking them off, penalties given, sendings off, all of that. And they are dictating a huge amount of that. So I'm afraid it's just not good enough to say that, we don't need to talk about it because it's loser talk. I don't agree with that at all. I think that, given a fair playing field, given a level playing field, or given even actual honest mistakes, yeah, I mean, those are even less likely now because of our, things can happen, but hopefully not definitive things. So yeah, the closer we get to ruling guys like Muir out of the game, the happier I'll be, because we're listening to that, and I don't know why we'd be dancing around calling it cheating. It's obviously cheating, and we've called it that for many years. And as you started off with saying, we keep getting told we're paranoid, and then they keep getting found out. So look, I think the payment for, what did they say it was, like an extra $100,000 or something for the, I don't know if that's $100,000 per club, but how much can it be to have a decent number of cameras at a ground? It cannot be that prohibitive to have cameras at a ground. The camera on I've got on this thing here, these you buy UHD cameras for 50 quid and put one in the goal line. Do you know what I mean? Put it in the flag. How difficult is that? Why is that a problem?
They're not prioritising it. They could easily prioritise it, couldn't they?
Yeah, it's just, it always has been unacceptable, this tin pot version that we get, and it makes us all, it diminishes the value of the game. It diminishes how important that they think we think that they are perceiving the games to be. They just don't think it's important enough, and they are. So that would not have been a question for Muir, because it would have been, it would have been definitive. So it wouldn't have been subject to his bias. And how difficult can it be to get a decent amount of cameras at games? Really, there's hundreds of people standing there with phones. I'm sure they can, stick their hands in their pocket for a few iPhones and put them around the edge. Is it that hard? And put them on streaming. It's a joke, to be honest, and it makes the game seem really tin pot. It's just not good enough.
We had a really good conversation, actually. Ian Conroy was part of that in the Acsom group in relation to the kind of strengths and weaknesses of Scottish football. And for me, the biggest strength is always the fan base, the way that the game is supported in Scotland. It's incredible. But everything else could be sorted out with prioritisation and money. We've got the fans there. That's the thing. We've got two massively supported fans, which I know skews that table, when you're looking at the most supported nations in Europe. Scotland's at the top of the table, I get it. But you're looking at some of the things that it could just be sorted by buying a better system or paying more money, prioritising the funds into ensuring that referees are full time and making sure that obviously because they're full time, they're actually going to be of a better standard. Always bring this up with regards to the argument, and people always go back to that famous Jockstein quote, if you're good enough, the referee doesn't matter. And I'll always bring this up. Yes, I did dig this out for 1977. And the quote is around the fact that where Celtic are concerned, natural justice doesn't particularly prevail. And that for me, probably echoes a lot of ex-players that I've spoken to who played under Jockstein, who would tell them privately, this referee's giving you none. You know what they are. You know what John, you're up against.
Yeah, we actually spoke about this before, and as I said at the time, that you need to be good enough to beat them regardless of the referees. That was for the players. That is, that's for the players. That's that's what you're telling the players. You just need to be good enough. But that's not reality. But what are you going to say to the players? Oh, by the way, if we get nothing off the referee, just throw your hands up and quit.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be realistic. Jockstein wasn't an idiot. And he saw the bias as much as anyone. And it was much, much worse back then, let me tell you stories. But it was much worse back then. And quite rightly, that article slamming them. But it's purely, what else are you going to say to players? Listen, this guy's going to give us nothing today, so I don't know, just don't bother.
I know.
You've got to tell your men to go out there and overcome whatever obstacles are in front of them. It's that simple. That was just a motivational thing. It didn't mean that we have to tolerate cheating refs.
No, you're right. And it didn't mean that the issue wasn't big enough that it shouldn't be called out. Absolutely, John. It's the way it's been skewed over the years now. Terence Pratt is coming to Belfast to see us with Chris Sutton. I'm looking forward to, you've got your tickets. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And everybody else, if you want to come along, there is a ticket link underneath this video. Joe Donnelly, that is an absolute coincidence that the wee guy and all his pals are away to watch that film the day with Jack Black. But that's his mug, Joe, not mine. And the Slabbern Cabbage, patterns of assistance. God bless Alan from the Huddle Breakdown. How incredible is it, guys, right, that Alan Morrison coined a phrase which is now part of Scottish football parlance. It's part of the vernacular. Rangers now say there's a pattern of assistance against us. Unbelievable, Patrick, and kudos to Alan Morrison for coining it.
Yeah, but that's where you see it now, though. Sorry, Patrick. That's where you see it now. You don't see us saying it anymore. Because we said it to make a point. But now, if you see all the clips from Follow and stuff like that, it's pattern of assistance. But they live in this strange alternative reality where the SFA and the refs are biased against them.
That's bizarre.
You know what I mean? It's just like that's definitely a thing, mate. But they are absolutely convinced that everyone is out to get them. But in this case, nobody is. But they wish it was true because it would give them some excuse for their recent history. But anyway, sorry, Patrick.
The thing is, as well, John, just before Patrick chips in, I think it's important to call it out when you're on top. Patrick, we're enjoying the most domestically dominant period in the club's history in the last 25 years. Call it out now when we're on top.
Absolutely. It's easily divided when you're you've been the victim of a bad decision and you're sort of languishing. Well, in our case, it'd be second place, maybe not bottom of the league, but when you've had a period of being unsuccessful, it's quite easy to blame the refs, and it's easily for people not to take you seriously. Obviously, Celtic fans are criticised for, well, pretty much anything we do. I think we get criticised for celebrating. People will accuse us of being bored of celebrating. But we get criticised for complaining about the refs when we're winning stuff. Is it not enough for you? But you're right to call it out when you're winning, because you're right to call it out at any time, whenever it happens. But particularly when you're winning, because then it isn't seen as an excuse and it is taken seriously. And it needs to be called out by every team in the league who is the victim of an egregious decision, to use John's favourite term of mine. Totally egregious. But no, I mean, it is the most dominant domestic period in our history, the last sort of 9 seasons or so. and that is, at the expense of, as you've highlighted there, 6 pretty, thinking of another word now, pretty terrible decisions from one referee, Alan Muir. You could highlight plenty from John Beaton. You could highlight plenty from, I mean, Willie Collum gave a penalty facing the other way, didn't he? And he's the guy who's actually, to his credit, improving the standards of Scottish refereeing now. So, everyone's capable of making a mistake. What we are talking about is pattern of assistance and, potential unconscious bias as well as potential cheating. We don't have the proof to sort of share that, but every referee is guilty of a mistake. Some are guilty of possibly more, and it does need called out at every opportunity. And Alan, to his credit, I think it was the first of its kind. Certainly the first I've ever seen of data, hard facts. I think it was 2 or 3 years under Crawford Allen, the sort of penalty differential, and I seen the comparison with like Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team. They were actually getting more penalties per touches in the box than possibly the greatest club side ever assembled. It was a statistical anomaly, and now you see, as you pointed out at the top of the show, now that Crawford Allen has gone, that has gone away, and they're not going on their 80-match run of not conceding penalties. So, to sort of come back to the main point, it does need called out at every point, and it's not wise, I don't think, to sort of ignore it just because you're winning stuff. I think in order to get a better standard of officiating, yes, you need full-time referees, yes, you need more cameras for VAR, but you do need to highlight these mistakes when they arise.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great comments coming in. I'm going to get into these before we talk about this weekend's action. Who's the ref, by the way? Don't know if it's been announced yet. Barry Flaherty, Doogie. The very fact, and I say this quite regularly, the very fact that it's a thing, who's the officials in Scottish football, is it like that elsewhere? I'm not even sure if it is. Irishman in Porto, 2002, that way there could be no bias being accused. Here in Portugal, there had been cases of collusion in Italy and Spain likewise. So take that away. Absolutely. Yeah, it can exist. There's money at stake as well. When you bring in, and I'm not saying this before his lawyers give me a phone, I'm not saying this about Alan Muir, but there's money. When there's money involved and there's the potential to put on big bets on big games and all this kind of stuff, then obviously, there could well be collusion, and it's been proven in other parts of the world. Alex Burrell asks the question, has anyone seen anyone but Celtic by Paul Larkin? I've actually got that up on the shelf there, and I would implore anyone to go and seek it out. I've got the DVD. Do you still do DVD, guys? Probably not. It's maybe on Netflix or something, or YouTube. Slabbering Cabbage. Muir's relegation is a warning to all refs going forward. It's a small move with a much larger problem, but it's a move in the right direction nonetheless. I think we've given plenty of credit to Willie Collum since he took over from Crawford Allen. Let's talk about the game then this weekend, because I made a suggestion over the last couple of days, and I'll come to you first, John, to let you know, catch up on the 5 minutes you missed. I made the suggestion that not wholesale changes, but based on the back of what Brendan said after the game, and looking at the halftime substitutions that he made for 2 of the changes that I would make, I think we're going to get a few. And the 4 that I've put out there is that we drop Schlupp, Engels, Trusty and Kuhn. There's the 4 I would drop for the weekend. John, what's your take on this comfort zone that some of these guys seem to be in?
Well, changes need to be made, and we're past the point of messing about. I am not as blasé as some people are about, it's fine, it's just an attitude thing. Give them a kick up the backside. We'll be all right. Is that, we'll be all right because, the cup game, it's a big game. I appreciate not this week, but the week after. And you're like, is that right? We're just going to, everything will be all right. Did we not have big games recently? Was the Rangers game not a big game? Did we turn up for that? I think the problem is now that they've switched off to the extent where I think it's a real issue with our form. And it's not just a mentality thing now, it's crept into the game to the point where it is really affecting the play, the patterns of play. It's really affecting the form in a manifest and physical way. And it's really not easy. And you might argue it might not even be possible before the end of the season. I think it's likely we'll win the majority of our games, but I don't think we're going to see a return to the way we were playing earlier on in the season. I think, that there has been a marked decline, and I think the treble, in my view, is definitely at risk. I think could we lose a cup game? Absolutely. The way we're playing just now. Are you kidding me on? And how many times before every single game has the manager said, we're going to come out firing, we've addressed this, it's a slow start now, we'll come out firing. And did we? No. It's just not that easy. You can just saying it doesn't make it so. There are actions have to be taken. And some of these guys are, I mean, for me, Kuhn's got to move. Only explanation. No, nobody quits that hard. Do you know what I mean? He is definitely trying to avoid getting injured. He is not putting himself in any danger at all. He's barely making any effort. For me, that means he's definitely away in the summer. Nobody drops off that badly. He's even worse than he was last year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think he's gone. Schlupp, I mean, he's under more balls than a microscopic Cinderella. I don't understand.
I thought you were going to say something else. That's just my mind, sorry.
Actually, I could have gone that way, yeah. But he's in fact, he's still interpreted
Go back to that piece in the brothel.
I know. But I mean, since the point he came in, we had discussions about he was doing good stuff going forward. But even when he first came in, I said, I don't like the way he defends. I don't like how he doesn't try and cut out crosses. I don't like that. And now he's making Greg Taylor look like a dominating 6'6" left back at the back post. The man can't defend the post. His defence in the box is terrible. His positioning, in particular, is terrible. And I think he's just torched potentially any move that he was getting here. I think that's maybe a thing of the past now. You cannot put in performances like that in multiple occasions. And for Kuhn to be hooked at half time twice in 3 games, that is a disgrace, frankly. Yeah. That's nothing short of a disgrace, and you should be ashamed of yourself as a professional football player. If the manager thinks you've quit to that extent, you should be hunted out the club. I wouldn't give him another kick of the ball, and I genuinely don't care what he did earlier on in the season. You cannot do that. No, nobody's allowed to just quit that hard. If you can't be bothered putting any effort in, getting hooked at half time twice, that's amateur club stuff. That's boy turning up half cut after 6 pints before the game. Do you know what I mean? So that was awarding him sort of professional status there, to be fair, because if you're only half cut after 6 pints, you're doing well. But you know what I mean? He's so that's really, really poor. Engels has had, his performance. His performances have been patchy. And the funny thing is, I would seriously consider, if it wasn't for the fact that Alistair Johnson is having a bit of a mare as well, I would have Ralston in there, because it appears that Johnson has played a lot of football and he's struggling. And also the fact that Kuhn has been so dreadful is really impacting his game. So I would put Ralston in. I don't see any harm in that. If it wasn't for the fact that Trusty and Narovsky and Scale and all the rest of it was per many 1 from 3 and that centre-back left position in terms of who's going to have a good game, who's not, I would seriously consider replacing CCV. He has been really shaky. And when he's shaky, it gives everyone else the fear. So, there's an argument there to replace the entire back four. There's an argument there to replace, certainly I would have Jota on the right, I'd have Maeda going back to the left, and I'd have Ida through the middle. Big Ida, when he come on, at least appeared to be trying. And we have, again, issues in the midfield as we're prone to having. So I don't know why Bernardo didn't come on. Obviously, the manager's thinking he's not going to win you the game. He wanted to have the players with skill still on, and so fair enough. But for me, I think Bernardo has to start, and you have to see the manager really, really likes Hatate, and you can see almost why, because in between all that ridiculous ballooning the ball over the bar, he hit one off the post, the inside of the post as well, and he played a lovely ball through or two. So yeah, you can sort of see what he's going with it. But yeah, I mean, I would just replace him just for the sake of it, because if you've got someone there and it's small, it's relatively small margins, especially and against a team they'll be expected to beat, the effort being put in just isn't enough. And it's infecting the whole team, and everyone needs to be worried about being in that cup final squad and being in that cup final team.
Absolutely, John. You use every game between now and then as the kind of mechanism of saying to every single one of you guys, you're not guaranteed a place in this starting 11 for the cup final if we get there, by the way, John, because I share your concern with that.
Yeah.
But on the point of Kuhn, because Schlupp, I agree with that. His form's been dreadful, and he's far too easily beaten in the box for some guy who's coming with all this athleticism, and he looks like a combative player. He's built in the right way that you would expect him to be able to win these chances, and he's not even putting himself on the line. Kuhn should and could have put himself on the line, Patrick, and he would have scored an equaliser at the weekend. And it does kind of tend to push me towards what John's saying. Why is he not doing it? Well, there's really only one reason for that. He's not prepared to get himself hurt to score a goal for Celtic. And quite frankly, that's not good enough, is it?
No, not at all. Obviously, I don't know if he's got a move lined up. If he does, I would be pretty worried if you're the guy forking out the cash at that club, because you're looking at him and thinking, what kind of player are we getting here? One that sort of decides when he turns up. I don't want to cast aspersions. I think the squad as a whole, I think, put in such an effort against Bayern, and since then it's been so lacklustre. So the results have been so sporadic. Obviously, we've spoken about Hibs and the effect of the referee on that result, but we have put in some absolutely dreadful performances, absolutely dreadful. And he obviously does need to bring the changes. I'm concerned with the back four, because you never like to make too many changes to a back four. He's obviously brought Trusty back in ahead of Nawrocki. CCV had a bad game, so maybe that affects Trusty more than what it should do.
Can I just ask you? Sorry, Patrick. Can I just ask? I don't know if this has been covered. I thought Trusty was out because his wife was giving birth, and then the next thing I saw was a picture of his very, very, very pregnant wife at the wedding for their getting married. So two things. If he was out and he was out the squad completely and there was no mention of an injury, what was that about? And then secondly, why is he allowed to get married during the season? Back. I mean, I know this is off the point, but back in the day, you're talking about attitudes here. Back in the day, I don't think my dad or his compatriots ever went to each other's weddings because we were all getting married at the same time. They were all either getting married or on honeymoon because it was off season. Yeah. You get married in the off season. Why are you getting married now? And I just think that kind of thing, maybe we're missing, I could be misinterpreting that, but it's the kind of thing, it's just like, when you start talking about the culture and how easy it is to undermine a culture, you have to be looking at the wee things and the lack of focus and the lack of discipline. But anyway, that's sorry, Patrick.
I think
Tommy Rogic was the same, wasn't he? He had an issue with getting married during the season, didn't he? And he ended up, I think he went and done it anyway because it was Tommy Rogic. He can do what he wants. But no, you're spot on there. Why at the business end of the season would you be doing that? It's a good point, John.
Yeah, I think that pregnancy thing, I thought that was just a rumour. I thought Brendan said before the Rangers game in his pre-match that he had a sort of slight calf strain. I could be misremembering that, but I think the giving birth thing was just a rumour on Twitter a few days before. I'd have to look into it.
But, I don't know why he was out the squad, but the giving birth thing was definitely a rumour based on the pictures.
I mean, I think Brendan obviously does have to bring the changes. I think Kuhn is obviously the first name off the team sheet based on his performances. I didn't realise the start there that he's been taken off at half time so frequently in the last few games. That's pretty dreadful. I don't know. I think there was a lot made about the clubs that he's been at and why he's not been successful, and maybe there might be a sort of mentality issue. I think when he first signed. It's hard to pinpoint. I'm sure it will sort of come out in the wash, but he obviously needs time out of the team because he's not performing, and to do it at such a crucial point in the season is just totally unacceptable. I don't know if he's got some personal issue or whether he's checked out, but it's unacceptable, and Brendan needs to make that call.
Patrick, I'll just say some very astute judges of a player, last season suggested that he might not be that good. We were
right all along, John. We were right all along.
Some of those very astute judges of a player may have apologised prematurely and are now claiming their criticism back.
No idea what you're talking
about. I mean, Brendan needs to make a decision. I think whoever partners Carter Vickers probably has to play the rest of the season. Whether he bombs Trusty and says, right, you've had a bad game, Nawrocki's back in because he done nothing wrong, or he's going to stick with Trusty and say, look, Carter Vickers had a bad game, that affected your game, first game back. I'm going to stick with you. I think he needs to lay down a marker. And I think you're right. If we're dropping Kuhn, you could maybe play Johnson at the same time. I think playing Ralston against Kilmarnock, it effectively gives him 2 weeks off from first team professional football. He's obviously still training in the lead up to that semi-final, and as we've discussed, that semi-final is a massive game based on our form. So I think Yang comes in. I think Ralston could come in. I think he's going to stick with Trusty, to be honest. I thought Engels had a quiet game. I'd be very surprised if Bernardo doesn't come into the team, however, because that was such a strange decision not to bring him on at all.
Yeah, and by the way, yes, anything goes, Mr. Aitor, even if it's wedding planning, we will discuss it in the world of Celtic, 100%. A couple of ones here. We're getting some really nice comments about John Hughes, and one for Chris, none for me and Paddy, by the way. Chris is the epitome of gentlemanly conduct. He is, isn't he? Definition of it. And Ridiculizer, we are keen to go in that way. Football is going to become like Robot Wars, a completely mechanistic, algorithm-driven percentage and stats game of Monopoly, individual flair and passion traded for regimented routine. That sounds like the youth academy system in Scotland right now as well.
I would say that Ridiculizer did make a very interesting point earlier about potential that this is a precursor, VAR is a precursor to AI refs. And do you know what? You can definitely see that happening. Absolutely definitely see that happening. There's just like an orbiting, so you've got like the way that they have it in England just now, the VAR with the camera on the top of the game and the cables. Yeah. And you can definitely see that happening. That's scary. And that's the way things might go, but it is actually scary. And I'm under orders, Paul John. I'm under orders from my mother, and I always do. My mum tells me, and I have to shout out a very, very big fan of Acsom called Gary Gillespie, who was on holiday with her and my cousins there, and so he tunes into the show all the time. And if I didn't do that, I'd be getting in trouble afterwards, and nobody wants in trouble from their mum,
Never. No, that's brilliant, John. Thanks to Gary Gillespie. I was at another Gary Gillespie's debut for Celtic against Falkirk. He scored, rounded the goalie, and we won 4-1. It's not beyond the realms, John, to have AI, when it comes to refereeing. I've spoken to Liam and all this when we've got the international continental Acsom contributors on, that we'll all be sitting together watching it with VR headsets. I had that VR headset on once. I felt sick after it. It was on a roller coaster. Seriously, it is bizarre. It is bizarre, right? But we'll all be sitting there with our VR season tickets. All right, Chris. Get the hot dog next to each other.
It's not the ticket issue, isn't it?
It's definitely good. Watch this space. We don't often get it wrong, even when it comes to Kuhn.
There's Kevin Graham saying, what school did the AI go to?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Masonic AI.
Get the AI in sooner rather than later. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Yes, we dedicated quite a bit of time on the refereeing discussion today. There'll be more chat about the football, I'm sure, tomorrow, but it is an important discussion point. Got to thank every one of you, 1,750 tuning in as we speak. We're just about to cut you off, though, unfortunately, but thank you for tuning in. Everything we do is underneath the video and all the links, and thank you once again to Patrick McGilp, Chris McElwain, and John Hughes for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.